Please like the video and share it so that it reaches many more people and you get sawaba, or rewards from Allah. This could be a sawabe jariyah or continuous reward for you long after you are gone.
Volume 3, Book 31, number 150. Narrated by Hisham's father. Aisha said, Allah's apostle used to kiss some of his wives while he was fasting, and then she smiled. Volume 3, Book 31, number 151. Narrated by Zainab, daughter of Salama, that her mother said, while I was lying with Allah's apostle underneath a woolen sheet, I got the menstruation, and then slipped away and put on the clothes, which I used to wear in menses. He asked, What is the matter? Did you get your menses? I replied in the affirmative and then entered underneath that woolen sheet. I and Allah's apostle used to take a bath from one water pot and he used to kiss me while he was fasting. Volume 3, Book 31, number 152. Narrated by Aisha. At times, in Ramadan the Prophet used to take a bath in the morning not because of a wet dream and would continue his fast. Volume 3, Book 31, number 153. Narrated by Abu Bakr bin Abdur Rahman. My father and I went to Aisha and she said, I testified that Allah's apostle at times used to get up in the morning in a state of janaba from sexual intercourse, not from a wet dream, and then he would fast that day. Then he went to Salama and she also narrated a similar thing. Volume 3, Book 31, number 154. Narrated by Abu Hurairah. The Prophet said, if somebody eats or drinks forgetfully, then he should complete his fast, for what he has eaten or drunk has been given to him by Allah. Narrated, Amir bin Rabi'a, I saw the Prophet cleaning his teeth with siwak while he was fasting so many times as I can't count. And narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, but for my fear that it would be hard for my followers, I would have ordered them to clean their teeth with siwak on every performance of ablution. The same is narrated by Jabir and Zaid bin Khalid from the Prophet, who did not differentiate between a fasting and a non-fasting person in this respect, using siwak. Aisha said, the Prophet said, it, i.e. siwak, is a purification for the mouth and it is a way of seeking Allah's pleasures. Atta and Qatada said, there is no harm in swallowing the resultant saliva. Volume 3, Book 31, number 155. Narrated by Humran. I saw Uthman performing ablution. He washed his hands thrice, rinsed his mouth and then washed his nose, by putting water in it and then blowing it out, and washed his face thrice, and then washed his right forearm up to the elbow thrice, and then the left forearm up to the elbow thrice. Then smeared his head with water, washed his right foot thrice, and then his left foot thrice and said, I saw Allah's apostle performing ablution similar to my present ablution, and then he said, whoever performs ablution like my present ablution and then offers 2 rakat in which he does not think of worldly things, all his previous sins will be forgiven. Volume 3, Book 31, number 156. Narrated by Aisha. A man came to the Prophet and said that he had been burnt, ruined. The Prophet asked him what was the matter. He replied, I had sexual intercourse with my wife in Ramadan, while I was fasting. Then a basket full of dates was brought to the Prophet and he asked, where is the burnt, ruined man? He replied, I am present. The Prophet told him to give that basket in charity, as expiation. Volume 3, Book 31, number 157. Narrated by Abu Hurairah. While we were sitting with the Prophet, a man came and said, O Allah's Apostle, I have been ruined. Allah's Apostle asked what was the matter with him. He replied, I had sexual intercourse with my wife while I was fasting. Allah's apostle asked him, "Can you afford to manumit a slave?" He replied in the negative. Allah's apostle asked him, "Can you fast for 2 successive months?" He replied in the negative. The Prophet asked him, "Can you afford to feed 60 poor persons?" He replied in the negative. The Prophet kept silent, and while we were in that state, a big basket full of dates was brought to the Prophet. He asked, "Where is the questioner?" He replied, "I am here." The Prophet said to him, "Take this basket of dates and give it in charity." The man said, "Should I give it to a person poorer than I? By Allah, there is no family between its, i.e. Medina's, 2 mountains who are poorer than I." The Prophet smiled till his premolar teeth became visible and then said, "Feed your family with it." Volume 3, Book 31, number 158. Narrated by Abu Hurairah. A man came to the Prophet and said, "I had sexual intercourse with my wife on Ramadan, while fasting." The Prophet asked him, "Can you afford to manumit a slave?" He replied in the negative. The Prophet asked him, "Can you fast for 2 successive months?" He replied in the negative. He asked him, "Can you afford to feed 60 poor persons?" He replied in the negative. Abu Hurairah added, "Then a basket full of dates was brought to the Prophet, and he said to that man, 'Feed poor people with this by way of atonement.' He said, 'Should I feed it to poorer people than we? There is no poorer house than ours between its, Medina's, mountains.' The Prophet said, 'Then feed your family with it.'" Volume 3, Book 31, number 159. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet was cupped while he was in the state of Al-Ihram, and also while he was observing a fast. Volume 3, Book 31, number 160. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet was cupped while he was fasting. Volume 3, Book 31, number 161. Narrated by Thabit al-Bunani. Anas bin Malik was asked whether they disliked the cupping for a fasting person. He replied in the negative and said, "Only if it causes weakness." Volume 3, Book 31, number 162. Narrated by Ibn Abi Awfa. We were in the company of Allah's apostle on a journey. He said to a man, "Get down and mix a wick, powdered barley, with water for me." The man said, "The sun has not set yet, O Allah's apostle." The Prophet again said to him, "Get down and mix a wick with water for me." The man again said, "O Allah's apostle, the sun." The Prophet said to him, for the 3rd time, "Get down and mix a wick with water for me." The man dismounted and mixed a wick with water for him. The Prophet drank it and then beckoned with his hand towards the east, and said, "When you see the night falling from this side, then a fasting person should break his fast." Volume 3, Book 31, number 163. Narrated by Aisha. Hamza bin Amr al-Aslami said, "O Allah's apostle, I fast continuously,